All right, so Jesus has just been preaching. He just gave this really amazing sermon called the Sermon on the Mount, and he's coming down from this mountain that he's been teaching on, and he's headed on his way home. So as he's on his way home, his disciples are following him, and he meets somebody who has leprosy. And this guy who has leprosy says, Jesus, please, I know that you could heal me. And I just don't know if you're willing. And I was wondering if you're willing, could you maybe make me clean? And Jesus says, yes, I am willing. And yes, be clean. And Jesus says, don't tell people what has happened to you today. Because when he said, be clean, he was immediately cleaned. And the leprosy was totally gone. And Jesus says, you know what? Don't tell people what has happened to you today. Instead, obey the law. God gave you a law and gave you instructions about what to do if you have leprosy and what to do when you're healed from leprosy. So go ahead and follow that law and go and show yourself to the priests. If you remember from the last story, I am not here to abolish the law. I'm here to uphold and fulfill the law. So go show yourself to the priests and worship God in the way that you were given. And so he does. And Jesus continues on his way. And when he gets home to Capernaum, there's a Roman soldier there, a centurion. And the centurion meets him and says, Jesus, I know that you are a man who can heal, and my servant is sick. He is paralyzed, and he's in a lot of pain and suffering. And Jesus says, you know what? Don't worry about it. I will just come over to your house and heal your servant, and it will be no problem. But the centurion says, no, I can't. I don't deserve to have you in my home. But I know, I understand what it's like to be somebody with power and authority, because I have power and authority, and I have servants and I have soldiers under me, and I tell this one, hey, go and do the thing. And he goes and does the thing. And then I tell this one, hey, go and do the thing. And he goes and does the thing. And so I know that you also are somebody with power and authority. And I know that you don't even need to see my servant or touch my servant. I know that if you just speak to the sickness, it will be gone. And Jesus is amazed by this. And he turns around and he says to the crowd, hey crowd, look at this centurion. Isn't this amazing? Can you believe it? I have been healing people and casting out demons, and I have not seen anybody who has such a faith like this. This centurion has a different kind of faith. And it is so amazing. And you know what? There's going to be people who come to God in the end, and they sit down at the great feast with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob, and they are going to be people from the east and from the west and from all over the world, and they're going to sit and feast with God in his kingdom. But there's going to be some people who are Jews who are the true heirs of the kingdom, and they're not going to be people who actually loved and followed and believed in me, and they are going to be cast out of the kingdom, and there's going to be darkness, and there's going to be weeping, and there's going to be gnashing of teeth. And Jesus turns back to the centurion and he says, this is really cool. I'm so happy I ran into you today, and you can go home, your servant as well. So the centurion goes on home, and he's so excited, and he goes in and finds that his servant is well, and he asks the servant, asks the other servants all about it, and they tell him exactly what happened. And the centurion puts together the pieces, and he realizes that it was exactly at the same moment when Jesus said the servant would be well, that the servant became well. Meanwhile, Jesus has decided to go and visit Simon's house, Simon Peter, who you'll remember from a couple stories back. This was the Simon who Jesus called when he was fishing and called him to be his disciple. And Jesus goes and he visits Simon's house, and he sees that Simon's mother-in-law is sick. She's laying in bed with a fever. And Jesus says, you know what, no problem. And he just goes and he touches her, and she immediately becomes whole again and healthy. And she jumps out of bed and she starts serving Jesus, and she starts serving Peter and all of those who are with him there. And Jesus hangs out for a while, and as night approaches, people start to bring people to Jesus, and they bring all of the people who are sick and people who have demons and the paralyzed, and Jesus casts out demons and he heals the sick, and he just loves these people and brings them to a place of wholeness. And he sees that the crowd is getting bigger and bigger, and he decides that he is going to travel across the lake. Which, what happens across the lake? you'll have to buy that next time. Meanwhile, go read the story for yourself. This story comes from Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 18. And as you read, think about, what does this story teach you about God? And what does this story teach you about humanity? And is there anybody in your life that you feel like would benefit from hearing this story? And then go and share it with them.